The emergency signal had reached every corner of the galaxy. Every species that called itself civilized, every world that traded in the great markets, every fleet that sailed the dark between stars received the same message. The swarm was coming, and nothing could stop it. Admiral stood at the center of the coalition chamber on Prime, his body clicking with frustration as he watched the holographic display. 17 star systems had fallen in 8 months. 17 worlds consumed by creatures that knew nothing but hunger. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply ate everything in their path and moved on to the next meal. The chamber was filled with representatives from 100 species. The tall, armored stood in their section, their chitin gleaming under the artificial lights. The graceful floated on anti-gravity platforms, their tentacles curling with anxiety. The small, furry huddled together, their large eyes reflecting fear. All of them had come because the Admiral had called, and all of them knew what he would ask. "We need soldiers," said, his voice amplified across the chamber. "Ships alone cannot win this war. We need ground forces to take back the worlds they've claimed. We need warriors willing to face the swarm in close combat." One by one, the species made their pledges. They offered 3 million of their elite guard. They promised their drone armies. The small as they were, volunteered their engineering corps to build fortifications. Species after species stepped forward with what they could give. Then it was humanity's turn. Ambassador Cole walked to the speaking platform. She was a small woman by human standards, with gray hair pulled back in a simple style and eyes that had seen too many wars. The other species watched her with polite disinterest. Humans were known as clever traders and decent engineers, but they were not warriors. They had joined the galactic community only 3 centuries ago. What could they possibly offer against a threat like the Earth pledges its finest warriors to the coalition cause, said, her voice calm and steady. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Admiral leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing on the human ambassador. "Warriors, we were not aware that humanity maintained significant military forces." "We do not advertise our capabilities," replied. "But I assure you, Admiral, what we send will be worth more than numbers alone." "How many soldiers can you provide?" 5,000 handlers and their partners." The chamber fell silent. 5,000 was nothing. They were sending 3 million. The drones numbered in the tens of millions. 5,000 humans would be a drop in an ocean of war. "Ambassador Cole," said slowly, "perhaps you do not understand the scale of this conflict." "I understand perfectly, Admiral. You asked for soldiers. We are sending something better." Before could respond, turned and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. She did not explain further. She simply left the other species to wonder what humanity was planning. On Earth, the message arrived at United Military Command within the hour. General Perry read it twice, then smiled. He was an old soldier, by conflicts that most humans preferred to forget. He had commanded forces in the Mars Rebellion and the Europa Campaign. He knew what war looked like up close, and he knew exactly what the galaxy needed. "Get me division," he said to his aide. "All units, tell them the galaxy is finally ready to meet our friends." 3 days later, the transport ships began launching from Earth. They were not the largest ships in the human fleet, but they were specially designed for their cargo. Climate-controlled holds, reinforced kennels, aquatic chambers, aviaries. Everything needed to transport creatures that no other species in the galaxy had ever seen in war. Sergeant Brooks stood in one of those holds, his hand resting on the head of a German shepherd named Ghost. The dog was large, nearly 90 pounds of muscle and fur, with eyes that seemed to understand everything said. They had been together since Ghost was 8 weeks old, a tiny bundle of fur that had grown into the finest combat dog in the division. "You ready for this, boy?" asked quietly. Ghost's tail wagged once, a silent answer. Around them, other handlers checked on their own partners. dogs of every breed suited for combat, Belgian with their endless energy, Dutch shepherds with their fierce loyalty, bloodhounds with noses that could track a target across continents. There were also horses in the larger holds, bred for cavalry work that humans had perfected over thousands of years. Falcons rested in the aviary section, their sharp eyes already scanning for prey. In the aquatic chambers, dolphins clicked and whistled, eager for the mission ahead. None of the other species knew what was coming. They expected powered armor and heavy weapons. They expected drones and combat robots. They expected the same tools of war that every advanced civilization used. They did not expect the beasts. Captain Maria Santos walked through the holds, checking on each unit. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she had earned every promotion. Her partner was a Belgian named Blade, a dog that had saved her life more times than she could count. Blade walked beside her now, his ears alert, his body ready for any threat. "All units report ready, Captain," said as she approached. "Good. The Coalition thinks we are a joke. They think 5,000 humans will make no difference in their war." "They will learn," replied. "Yes, they will." Maria looked down at Ghost, then at Blade. "Our ancestors took wolves into their caves 40,000 years ago. They turned wild horses into partners. They trained falcons to hunt. Every war humanity ever fought, we fought alongside these creatures. The galaxy has no idea what that means." The transport ships entered faster than light travel, carrying their precious cargo toward the staging ground on 4. Behind them, Earth grew small and then disappeared entirely. Ahead of them waited a galaxy that had never seen anything like what humanity was about to unleash. Sat with Ghost in their quarters, running his fingers through the dog's fur. Ghost leaned against him, warm and solid and utterly loyal. They had trained together for years. They had bled together. They had saved each other more times than could remember. The bond between them was not something that could be measured, or it simply existed, as natural as breathing. "They think they know what predators look like," whispered to Ghost. "They have never met anything like you." Ghost's eyes met his and saw understanding there. The dog knew they were going to war. He knew there would be danger and pain and possibly death. But he also knew that would be beside him every step of the way, just as knew Ghost would never abandon him. That was the bond. That was what humanity was bringing to the galaxy's war. Not just soldiers, not just weapons. Family. The Coalition staging ground on 4 was chaos organized into order. Ships from 100 worlds filled the landing zones. Soldiers of every shape and size moved through the corridors of the massive base built into the barren moon's surface. They marched in perfect formations, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. The drones hovered in silent clouds, waiting for commands. Everywhere there was noise and motion, and the barely controlled panic of a galaxy preparing for war. Admiral stood at the main observation deck, watching the human transports descend through the thin atmosphere. He had doubts about these newcomers. 5,000 soldiers meant nothing in a war of this scale, but the human ambassador had spoken with such confidence that he could not simply dismiss them. Perhaps they had some weapon, some technology that would prove useful. The transports landed, and the cargo doors opened. What emerged was not what anyone expected. The first creature down the ramp was a dog. A large German shepherd with a gray and black coat walked beside a human soldier, its nose already working, taking in the strange sense of an alien world. Behind them came more dogs. Then horses, massive creatures that towered over most of the smaller alien species. Then birds, perched on the arms of their handlers. Then wheeled tanks filled with water, inside which dolphins swam in tight circles. The entire landing zone went silent. Admiral stared at the display, his compound eyes unable to process what he was seeing. He turned to his aide, a young named, and demanded an explanation. Had none to give. "Ambassador Cole," said through clenched mandibles as he stormed toward the human delegation, "what is the meaning of this?" Cole stood calmly beside General Perry, watching as unit after unit of handlers and their animals disembarked. "These are our warriors, Admiral. These are animals, primitive creatures. You have brought pets to a war." "They are not pets." His voice remained steady. "They are the result of 40,000 years of partnership. Humans have never fought alone, Admiral. We always brought our beasts with us." "This is an insult," snapped. "The Coalition faces extinction, and humanity sends circus performers." General Perry stepped forward. "With respect, Admiral, you have no idea what you are looking at. These animals have senses your technology cannot match. They have instincts your drones cannot replicate. And they have something no machine will ever have." "And what is that?" "Love," Perry said simply. "They love their handlers. They will die to protect them. And that makes them more dangerous than any weapon in your arsenal." Was not convinced. He demanded a demonstration, certain that these primitive creatures would prove useless against real soldiers. Perry agreed immediately, a small smile on his weathered face. The demonstration was arranged in one of the combat simulation chambers. The challenge was simple. Sergeant Brooks and his dog Ghost would face 5 elite soldiers in a capture scenario. They had to prevent from reaching a target zone at the far end of the chamber. They could use any tactics they wished, short of lethal force. They were confident. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor that could stop small arms fire. They had trained since birth for combat. Their species had dominated galactic warfare for 3,000 years. One human and one animal presented no challenge at all. The chamber went dark. Moved through the shadows, Ghost padding silently at his side. The dog's ears swiveled constantly, picking up sounds that human ears could never detect. His nose filtered the air, identifying 5 distinct scent trails. He knew exactly where they were hiding. Ghost stopped, his body going rigid, his nose pointing toward the left wall. Understood immediately. One enemy, 15 meters away, trying to flank their position. He adjusted his route without a word. Ghost had already told him everything he needed to know. The first never saw them coming. Moved past his position like smoke, and by the time the soldier realized what had happened, the human was already gone. Ghost had led them around every ambush, through every trap, avoiding every sensor they had placed. The second and third tried to work together, covering each other's blind spots. Ghost circled them, his gray fur vanishing into the darkness. He made no sound. He left no trace. He simply appeared behind them and followed. 2 more eliminated from the exercise. The last 2 soldiers abandoned their positions and tried to directly intercept. They were fast, their long legs covering ground quickly. But Ghost was faster. The dog sprinted ahead, and when they tried to block's path, Ghost was already there, herding them away from his handler like sheep. Reached the target zone with 3 minutes to spare. The lights came up. They stood in stunned silence, unable to understand how they had lost. Their equipment was superior. Their training was legendary. But they had been outmaneuvered by a single human and a creature that weighed less than 100 pounds. Commander, the senior observer, approached slowly. He looked down at Ghost, who sat calmly at his handler's feet, tongue hanging out in what might have been a smile. "How did you know where we were?" asked. "Our thermal signatures were masked. Our equipment emitted no electromagnetic signals. We made no sound." Scratched Ghost behind the ears. "He smelled you. He heard your breathing. He felt the vibrations of your footsteps through the floor. And when he knew where you were, he told me." "Told you? The creature does not speak." "He does not need to speak. We have been together for 7 years. I know what every movement of his body means. When his ears go forward, there is something ahead. When he stops, there is danger. When he looks at me a certain way, he is telling me to trust him." Was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Admiral. "We need more of these humans, immediately." Hesitated, his pride wounded by the demonstration. But he was not a fool. He had seen what the dog could do. He had seen how the human and the animal moved as one being. "How do they communicate so perfectly?" he asked Dr. Susan Park, the human assigned to explain the bond to coalition species. "They evolved together," Susan replied. 40,000 years ago, humans took wolves into their communities. Over time, both species changed. The wolves became dogs bred for specific purposes: hunting, herding, guarding, fighting. And humans developed the ability to read their body language to understand them without words. It is not technology, Admiral. It is 10,000 generations of trust. Can we replicate this bond with our own species? Susan shook her head. You cannot manufacture what took to build. The bond is not trained. It is inherited. These dogs are born wanting to serve their handlers. These handlers are born understanding their dogs. It is in their blood. Admiral looked out at the human units assembling on the staging ground. Dogs walked beside their handlers. Horses stood patiently as riders checked their equipment. Falcons stretched their wings, ready to fly. He had asked the galaxy for soldiers. Humanity had sent something far more dangerous. They had sent family. The planet 7 was dying. Its jungles, once green and full of life, had turned gray under the infestation. The swarm had landed 4 months ago, and since then, nothing the coalition sent had survived longer than a few days. 3 assault forces had been destroyed. Thousands of and soldiers had vanished into the gray biomass that now covered half the continent. They were perfect hunters. Their hive mind connected every drone to every other, sharing information instantly across thousands of kilometers. When one drone saw something, every drone knew. When one drone attacked, 1,000 others responded. Coalition soldiers could not hide. Their electromagnetic signatures betrayed them. Their thermal readings gave away their positions. Even their heartbeats, amplified by monitoring equipment, could be detected by sensors. Captain Maria Santos stood at the briefing room on the assault carrier, studying the holographic map of 7. Her dog Blade sat beside her, his dark eyes fixed on the display as if he too understood the challenge ahead. Around her stood 11 other handlers and their animals, and Ghost, Danny and his falcon Arrow. Others with dogs bred for tracking, for combat, for silent movement through hostile terrain. 3 coalition assaults have failed, Maria said. They detect conventional forces before they can get close to their objectives. Our mission is different. We go in quiet. We find their primary hive node. We mark it for orbital strike. Intel says the node is somewhere in Sector 7, added, but no one has been able to get close enough to confirm. That is because no one has brought the right tools, Maria replied. She looked down at Blade, then at Ghost, then at Arrow perched on Danny's arm. They have every species in the coalition. They know how move. They know how think, but they have never seen anything like our partners. The insertion was silent. A small shuttle dropped them at the edge of the infested zone and then vanished back into orbit. 12 humans and their animals stood at the border between living jungle and corruption, looking at the gray landscape ahead. Ghost's nose was already working. The dog pulled in air, processing scents that human noses could not detect. He smelled the decay of biomass. He smelled the chemical trails left by drone patrols. He smelled something else too, something that made his hackles rise and his body tense. "What is it, boy?" asked quietly. Ghost looked at him, then looked to the east. His meaning was clear: danger that way. Maria made a hand signal, and the team adjusted their route. They moved through the jungle like shadows, guided by the animals who could sense what technology could not. When Arrow circled overhead and called out in a specific pattern, Danny knew there were below. When one of the tracking dogs stopped and pointed, the team knew exactly where the enemy was hiding. The drones tried to find them. They sent patrols through the jungle, searching for the intruders that their sensors had detected. But the sensors could not understand what they were seeing. The animals did not register as threats. Their electromagnetic signatures were minimal. Their behavior patterns did not match any species in the database. A drone passed within 10 meters of and Ghost. The dog remained perfectly still, not even breathing hard. The drone's sensors swept over them and found nothing. It moved on, searching for enemies that fit patterns it understood. The team pressed deeper into infested territory. By nightfall, they had covered 20 kilometers. Maria called a halt in a small clearing, setting up a defensive perimeter while the animals rested. Ghost curled up beside, his body warm against the cold night air. Blade lay across Maria's feet, his ears still twitching at every sound. "How much further?" Danny asked, feeding Arrow small pieces of meat. "Another 30 kilometers to Sector 7, Maria replied. "We move at dawn." The next morning brought the first combat. A patrol stumbled onto their position, 4 drones moving through the undergrowth with their acid sprayers ready. Ghost detected them first, his body going rigid, his lips pulling back from his teeth in a silent snarl. Gave the signal, the team moved. They had never faced predators before. Every species they had consumed was prey. They had evolved to hunt creatures that ran, that hid, that feared. They had no programming for enemies that attacked. Ghost hit the first drone like a missile, his jaws finding the soft joint between head and body. The drone collapsed, its acid sprayer firing uselessly into the air. Blade took the second, moving with the speed that had earned Belgian their reputation as the finest combat dogs in human history. The other handlers and their partners swarmed the remaining drones before they could alert the hive mind. 4 killed in under 10 seconds, no alarm raised. Maria looked at the bodies, then at her team. Keep moving. They reached Sector 7 on the 3rd day. Arrow soared high above the jungle, his cameras transmitting images back to Danny's display. The young soldier studied the footage, then pointed to a massive structure rising from the gray landscape. "There," he said, "the hive node." It was enormous, a living building made of biomass, pulsing with energy that connected it to every drone on the planet. Destroy this, and the entire infestation would collapse into chaos. Maria marked the coordinates. "Orbital command, this is Strike Team. We have visual confirmation on the primary hive node, transmitting targeting data now." The response came within seconds. "Confirmed, Strike Team. Bombardment commencing in 5 minutes. Recommend immediate evacuation." They ran. The animals led the way, finding paths through the jungle that avoided patrols. Ghost sprinted ahead, checking routes, circling back to guide the team. Arrow flew overhead, watching for threats. The dogs with tracking abilities found the fastest way back to the extraction point. The orbital strike hit exactly on time. The sky turned white as kinetic projectiles slammed into the hive node, vaporizing it in an instant. Across 7, drones faltered. Their connection to the hive mind shattered. They stumbled, confused, unable to coordinate. Coalition forces, waiting in orbit, launched their assault. Within hours, they had established a foothold on the planet. Within days, they had secured the entire continent. Admiral received the reports with something approaching disbelief. 12 humans and their animals had accomplished what 3 full assault forces could not. They had found a target hidden for 6 weeks. They had moved through hostile territory without detection. They had turned the tide of the entire campaign. He contacted General Perry immediately. "I need more of your beast handlers," said. "As many as you can send." Perry smiled. "They are already on their way, Admiral." On 7, Maria Santos sat with Blade watching coalition ships land in the newly secured zone. The dog rested his head on her lap, exhausted but content. Ghost lay nearby with their bodies pressed together for warmth. Danny stood apart, arrow on his arm. The young soldier looked at the gray landscape, then at the coalition forces pouring in. "They did not think we could do it," he said. "They thought we were a joke." "They learned," Maria replied. "And they are learning too. They have never faced predators before. Now they know what it feels like to be prey. Ghost raised his head and looked at. His tail wagged once. The war had only begun, but humanity and their beasts were ready. 3 months into the war, everything had changed. Human beast handler units had become the most valuable assets in the coalition military. Every commander wanted them. Every front requested them. The teams that had seemed like a joke at 4 were now the tip of the spear, leading assaults across a dozen star systems. Admiral had stopped questioning their methods. He had seen too many victories. He had watched too many impossible missions succeed. The humans and their animals did things that no other force could accomplish. They found hidden nests. They tracked enemy movements through terrain that blinded sensors. They fought with a coordination that made them seem like single organisms with many bodies. The other species tried to understand. The Council sent scientists to study the bond between handler and animal. They observed for weeks, taking measurements, recording data, trying to find the secret that made humans so effective. The scientists reported back that there was no secret. The handlers simply knew what their animals were thinking, and the animals simply knew what their handlers needed. "It is not science," the lead researcher complained. "It is something else, something we cannot measure." Commander, who had led forces on 4 joint operations with human units, understood better than the scientists. He had watched Brooks and Ghost work together in combat. He had seen how the dog anticipated threats before they appeared. He had seen how trusted Ghost with his life. "They are not 2 beings working together," told the Council. "They are 1 being with 2 bodies. The human provides purpose. The animal provides senses. Together, they become something greater than either could be alone." They tried to replicate this. They brought hunting creatures from there, predators that had served their ancestors in ancient times. They trained handlers to work with these animals, following human methods as closely as they could. It did not work. The animals obeyed commands, but they did not anticipate. They followed orders, but they did not love. When danger came, they hesitated. When their handlers were threatened, they looked for escape rather than standing to fight. They tried genetic engineering. They created creatures designed to bond with handlers, programmed at the cellular level for loyalty and obedience. These artificial beasts performed better than the animals, but something was still missing. They served their masters, but they did not choose to serve. There was no love in their actions, only programming. Dr. Susan Park explained it to a coalition science council. "The bond cannot be manufactured," she said. "It evolved over 40,000 years. Humans and dogs shaped each other. We bred them to need us, and in doing so, we changed ourselves to need them. It is not technology. It is not training. It is biology and emotion intertwined across 10,000 generations. Surely there must be a way to accelerate the process," and scientists insisted. "There is no shortcut. You cannot build in a laboratory what nature created over." The coalition accepted this truth reluctantly. Humans and their beasts would remain unique. No other species could replicate what they had. Meanwhile, the war continued. Brooks and Ghost had fought on 7 worlds since 7. They had seen victories and defeats. They had lost friends, both human and animal. Each battle took something from them, but each battle also proved what they could do. It was on the ice world of 3 that everything almost ended. The mission was supposed to be simple. A small presence had been detected in the polar regions, and its team was sent to eliminate it before it could establish a hive node. They landed in a blizzard, visibility near 0, temperatures cold enough to kill in minutes. Ghost led the way through the storm. His fur, bred for exactly these conditions, kept him warm. His nose cut through the wind, finding the chemical traces that marked territory. Followed, trusting his partner completely. They found the nest buried in an ice cave. The assault was quick and brutal. Dogs tore into drones while handlers covered them with weapons fire. Within minutes, the nest was destroyed. But one drone had escaped notice. It came from behind, its acid sprayer aimed at. Ghost saw it first. The dog launched himself at the drone, jaws closing on the weapon just as it fired. The acid caught Ghost across the chest and shoulder. Heard his partner scream. It was a sound he had never heard before, a sound of pure agony that cut through the howling wind. He spun and killed the drone with 3 shots, then dropped to his knees beside Ghost. The dog was still alive but badly wounded. The acid had eaten through fur and skin, exposing muscle beneath. Ghost whimpered, his eyes finding space, seeking comfort even through the pain. Medics shouted, "I need a medic here." But they were 17 miles from the extraction point. The blizzard was getting worse. There was no way to call for evacuation. Did not hesitate. He wrapped Ghost in emergency blankets, lifted the 90-pound dog onto his shoulders and started walking. The other handlers tried to help but refused. Ghost was his partner. Ghost had saved his life. He would not let anyone else carry him. 17 miles through a blizzard. 17 miles with a wounded dog on his back. 17 miles in temperatures that should have killed them both. Made it, he walked into the extraction zone 4 hours later, nearly frozen, barely conscious, but still carrying Ghost. The dog was alive. Barely. Coalition medics examined Ghost and shook their heads. The damage was too severe. The humane thing to do was end his suffering. Refused. If he dies, it will be fighting, not on a table. He stayed beside Ghost for 6 days. He did not sleep. He barely ate. He held his partner's paw and talked to him, reminding him of all the missions they had completed, all the enemies they had defeated, all the years they had spent together. On the 7th day, Ghost opened his eyes. His tail wagged once. The coalition medics called it impossible. The wound should have been fatal. No creature should have survived such damage. Commander watched the reunion from across the medical bay. He saw weeping with joy, his arms around his dog. He saw Ghost licking his handler's face, weak but alive. He finally understood. "They did not train these beasts," said to Admiral. "They made them family, and family does not abandon family. Not ever." They had noticed the beast handlers too. They had analyzed the defeats, studied the patterns, identified the threat. New orders went out across the hive mind. Target the animals first. Kill the beasts and the humans become vulnerable. The war was about to enter its bloodiest phase, but in Ghost were ready. They had faced death together. And death had blinked first. The war had lasted 14 months when coalition intelligence finally found what they had been searching for. The Queen. The central mind that connected every drone, every hive, every nest across the galaxy. She lived on Prime, buried beneath miles of living biomass, protected by billions of her children. Admiral studied the intelligence reports with growing despair. A direct assault was impossible. The coalition fleet could bombard the planet for years without reaching the Queen. Ground forces would be consumed long before they got close. Every simulation ended in defeat. General Perry proposed a different approach. "A small team," he said at the War Council. "Handlers and their partners. They go in while the fleet provides distraction. They find the Queen. They kill her." "Suicide," replied. "Even your beast handlers cannot survive Prime." "Maybe not, but they can reach the Queen, and that is all that matters." The team was assembled from the finest handlers in human service. Brooks and Ghost, Maria Santos and Blade, Danny and Arrow, 9 others with their bonded companions, 12 humans, 12 animals, 24 lives against a planet of enemies. They gathered on the assault carrier the night before the mission. No one spoke of survival. No one pretended this was anything other than what it was. A final mission. A last chance to end the war. Sat with Ghost, running his fingers through the dog's fur. The scars from 3 were still visible, white lines across Ghost's chest where fur would never grow again. But the dog was strong. His eyes were clear. His spirit was unbroken. "We have been through a lot, boy," said quietly. "This is going to be the hardest one yet." Ghost leaned against him, warm and solid, a presence that needed no words. Maria joined them, blade at her side. "The fleet jumps in 6 hours. We launch as soon as they are distracted." "Any word on extraction?" "There will be no extraction. We make it out on our own, or we do not make it out at all." Nodded, he had expected nothing else. Danny was the youngest of the team, only 24 years old. He stood by the viewport, arrow perched on his arm, watching the stars. The Falcon's sharp eyes reflected the distant lights. "Are you scared?" Maria asked him. Danny considered the question. "Arrow is not scared. He trusts me to lead him where he needs to go, so I try to trust myself the same way." Maria smiled. "That is wisdom beyond your years, Private." "I learned it from him," Danny replied, stroking Arrow's feathers. The assault began at dawn, prime time. The Coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel and immediately engaged the orbital defenses. Thousands of ships filled the space around the planet, weapons blazing, drawing every drone away from the surface. In the chaos, a single shuttle slipped through. It descended through the atmosphere, avoiding detection, and landed at the edge of the primary hive mass. 12 handlers and their animals emerged into a nightmare landscape. Prime was alive. The ground pulsed beneath their feet. The air was thick with spores and chemical signals. Everywhere they looked, biomass stretched to the horizon, a living carpet of corruption that covered the entire planet. Ghost's nose led the way. The dog found paths through the biomass, avoiding concentrations of drones, leading the team deeper into enemy territory. Arrow soared overhead, his cameras mapping routes and spotting threats. The other animals worked in perfect coordination, each doing what they had been bred to do. They knew they were coming. The hive mind felt the intrusion like a splinter in flesh. Drones converged from every direction, millions of them, swarming toward the tiny team that dared to invade their home. The first casualties came within an hour. Handler Lisa Park and her tracking hound were overwhelmed by a wave of drones, buying time for the others to escape. She died fighting, her dog beside her until the end. More fell as they pushed deeper. Each death bought distance, each sacrifice brought them closer to the Queen. The survivors pressed on, grief pushed aside by duty. By nightfall, only 5 remained, and Ghost, Maria and Blade, Danny and Arrow. The Queen's chamber was beneath them. Ghost could smell her, an ancient presence that radiated through the biomass like a heartbeat through flesh. Looked at Maria, then at Danny. "This is it," he said. They descended through tunnels carved from living tissue, following Ghost's nose toward the source of the walls pulsed around them. The air grew thick with chemical signals, and then they emerged into a vast chamber and they saw her. The Queen was enormous. Her body filled the chamber, a mountain of flesh and neural tissue that stretched beyond the limits of human vision. She was ancient beyond measure, the mother of every drone that had ever existed, the mind that connected the entire swarm. She spoke into his mind, a voice that was not sound but pure thought. She wanted to understand. She had consumed thousands of species, but these small creatures were different. They did not flee. They did not surrender. They came to her heart with beasts beside them. "What are they?" she asked. "Why do they follow you?" Answered aloud, though he knew she heard his thoughts. "They are our partners, our family. They have been with us since before we built cities or sailed seas. They chose us, and we chose them." "What do you offer them?" "Everything, our love, our trust, our lives, and they give us the same." The Queen did not understand. She had never known love. She had never experienced trust. Her children obeyed because they were extensions of her will. They had no choice. But these creatures had chosen. Ghost attacked. The dog launched himself at the Queen with all the speed and fury that 40,000 years of breeding had created. Blade followed, then Arrow, diving from above with talons extended. The animals struck the queen's neural mass, tearing at tissue that had never been touched by predators. The queen screamed. It was a sound that echoed through the hive mind, a cry of pain and fear that every in the galaxy felt. She who had consumed civilizations, who had never known defeat, was experiencing terror for the first time. Fired into her exposed tissue, Maria covered him. Danny directed arrow to the most vulnerable points. The handlers fought alongside their animals, human and beast working as one. The queen died slowly. Her neural mass collapsed. Her connection to the hive mind shattered. Across the galaxy, drones faltered, their coordination destroyed, their purpose erased. Danny fell in the final moments, a drone's acid catching him as he protected Arrow. The young soldier died with his falcon on his arm, his last words a command for Arrow to fly. Maria took a wound that would have killed anyone else. Blade dragged her to safety, standing over her body, fighting off drones until coalition forces finally arrived. And Ghost survived. Barely. They were found together in the wreckage of the Queen's chamber, the dog curled around his handler, protecting him even in unconsciousness. The war was over. The memorial was built on Prime, where the call for soldiers had first gone out. It listed every handler who had fallen, every animal who had given their life. The names stretched across a wall of black stone, human and beast side by side. Admiral stood at the dedication ceremony, looking at the names. He turned to General Perry, who had come to honor his fallen soldiers. "What do you call these creatures?" asked. "These animals that fight and die beside you." Perry smiled, the same smile he had worn when he first received the call for soldiers. "We call them our best friends." 6 months later, sat on a hill on a world far from Prime, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors he had no names for. Ghost lay beside him, head resting on his lap, scars visible but healed. The war was over. The galaxy was safe, and they were together. Scratched Ghost behind the ears, and the dog's tail wagged slowly. "We did good, boy," said. Ghost looked up at him with eyes full of understanding, full of trust, full of love. They had brought beasts to the galaxy's war, creatures that could not be replicated or manufactured, creatures bound to humanity by 40,000 years of shared history, creatures that fought not because they were ordered to, but because they loved the humans who walked beside them. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. Humanity had sent family. And family had won.